This is the AWS Morning Brief Security Edition. AWS is fond of saying security is job zero. That means it's nobody in particular's job, which means it falls to the rest of us. Just the news you need to know, none of the fluff. This episode is sponsored in part by Honeycomb. When production is running slow, it's hard to know where problems originate. Is it your application code, users, or the underlying systems? I've got $5 on DNS, personally. Why scroll through endless dashboards while dealing with alert floods, going from tool to tool to tool that you employ, guessing at which puzzle pieces matter? Context switching and tool sprawl are slowly killing both your team and your business. You should care more about one of those than the other. Which one is up to you? Drop the separate pillars and enter a world of getting one unified understanding of the one thing driving your business: production. With Honeycomb, you guess less and know more. Try it for free at honeycomb.io/screaming-in-the-cloud. Observability, it's more than just hipster monitoring. Welcome to Last Week in AWS Security, the podcast. Let's get right to it. This is a doozy. So we all celebrated RSA, their big conference, in different ways, but here's the worst one. Orca Security apparently found a vulnerability in Azure and reasonably and responsibly reported it to Microsoft. Microsoft purchased a booth at RSA, then speedily got back to Orca's researcher only a month and a half later. 6 short weeks after that, Microsoft deployed an initial patch. Orca was then able to bypass the patch. Microsoft then expanded the size of their booth at RSA while also demonstrating versatility by paying Orca a $60,000 bug bounty, which is the only part of this story that Microsoft got even slightly right. Orca then mentioned to Microsoft that the security certificate that they'd exfiltrated was still valid. Microsoft swung into action and met with Orca. I imagine the substance of that meeting was, can you please say that again but use smaller words to do it, as if you were speaking to a small child. Azure finally understood what they were saying and deployed a second patch. 3 days later, Orca bypassed the second patch. Azure's response was to get a 60-foot banner installed above their booth at RSA and then deploy a third patch, which is presumably more secure. If you're on Azure, I strongly suggest that you conduct an immediate risk assessment. This isn't a technical mistake. It's a complete failure to instill a functional security culture. I am actively horrified by this. That wasn't even an item in the list. I had to insert this whole nonsense after I was already good to go with this episode. Let's get to the rest of it. The Meeting Owl video conference device apparently had significant enough security problems that they just ignored security research reports and waited until the information became public to remediate. Their instructions to their customers was to unplug the device when they weren't using it. Okay. My friend and yours, Brandon Sherman, writes about how Temporal structures its access control strategy with regard to AWS. This is kind of a weird one. The week's S3 Bucket Negligence Award goes to Mobike. Doesn't sound too weird, except for the fact that the company's out of business. It's defunct, but the user passports and IDs linger on in a legacy S3 bucket.
DoorDash had a problem. As their cloud-native environment scaled and developers delivered new features, their monitoring system kept breaking down. In an organization where data is used to make better decisions about technology and about the business, losing observability means the entire company loses their competitive edge. With Chronosphere, DoorDash is no longer losing visibility into their application suite. The key? Chronosphere is an open-source compatible, scalable, and reliable observability solution that gives the observability lead at DoorDash business confidence and peace of mind.
Read the full success story at snark.cloud/Chronosphere. That's snark.cloud/CHRONOSPHERE. A Google Cloud issue has now been disclosed, specifically that Cloud Functions or Cloud Run, launched from any GCP organization, can bypass Google Kubernetes engine authorized networks restrictions. In effect, that means that what you think of as a Kubernetes firewall suddenly firewalln't. And I finally have proof in the wild of someone migrating to AWS SSO and disabling IAM users entirely. This is advanced level stuff. You didn't start your account or login pattern this way from the beginning, but I love the fact that it exists and I recommend it if you can get there. AWS had a single thing of note, a blog post that I really like about IAM policy types, how and when to use them, because there are oh so many different types of IAM policies, and this thing talks about how to tell them apart. Please, for me, use at least one of them. And when it comes to tools, this one's a bit off the beaten path because it's not one of my traditional open source things that I point at, but I've been using Tailscale for a while. It remains elusively hard to explain. Fundamentally, it's a friendly user interface on top of WireGuard to build a full mesh VPN between all of the things you care about. I'm using it on my phone, my tablet, on virtual machines, on my DNS server, which runs on a Raspberry Pi, and a whole bunch of other things. And annoyingly, all of my nonsense still fits comfortably within the free tier. I've never paid them a dime, and I'm starting to get annoyed that they won't take my money, which is why I'm talking about it here. And that's what happened last week in AWS security. It was a bit of a doozy. Hopefully this next week goes better. Thanks for listening. Stay salty. Thank you for listening to the AWS Morning Brief Security Edition. For the latest in AWS security that actually matters, please follow AWS Morning Brief on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever the hell it is you find the dulcet tones of my voice. And be sure to sign up for the Last Week in AWS newsletter at lastweekinaws.com.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.